Welcome to Nutrition 805 midterm. This is Module 2, presented by Courtney, Jenna, Ashley, and myself, Victoria. Today we'll be discussing the role of diet quality in inflammation. So we chose to do a high-fat diet and how that induces inflammation in a hepatocyte, and then how that leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD. So we'll be looking at a high-fat diet, and then also inflammatory responses mediated by the hepatocytes in the liver. So we know that the American diet is this Western diet, which is high in fat and excess of all the macronutrients, and how that leads to NAFLD. So we'll be looking at an overview of inflammation in the adipose tissue, contributing to inflammation and stress in the liver, and leading to NAFLD associated with these pro-inflammatory cytokines and fewer anti-inflammatory cytokines released from the inflamed adipose cells.
To get a better perspective on that, we can start just with the normal metabolism in the liver, and then we can view that dysfunction that the adipocytes kind of put onto this cell. So once we consume dietary nutrients, the fat that we consume binds to albumin protein, and that brings it into a hepatocyte, and it can contribute to energy via the TCA cycle, or it can go down this pathway, ending up in VLDL and being transported systemically. And just to note, it's not only dietary fat that can contribute to this VLDL or the triglycerol pool, but we can see that glucose can follow it, and amino acids can find a convoluted pathway as well.
Yeah, we know the Western diet, it accumulates all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So going into the inflammation in the hepatocyte, specifically starting with the inflamed adipose tissue, a high-fat diet leads to adipose tissue inflammation, which ultimately it leads to the reduction in cellular capacity to respond to the action of insulin. And in adipose tissue, it acts on the hormone-sensitive lipase, HSL, increasing the risk of lipolysis and shifting the directionality towards free fatty acid accumulation in the liver. With that, it alters the transport of triglycerides outside of a hepatocyte, such as the transport of VLDL, and inhibits beta oxidation. And this leads to the accumulation of adipocytes in the liver and further inflammation for sure.
And I think the last slide really put that into perspective, just following that pathway, how, yeah, if we don't get these things to exit the liver, then of course we get this disease.
Right, and that ultimately triggers the induction of hepatic resistance to leptin, and the reduction of adiponectin with an increase in tissue necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6, all tying back to the theme on inflammation, right? So leading us into our second impact.
Second impact is with oxidative stress in hepatocytes, which is initially compensated by cellular antioxidant mechanisms. However, liver overload of free fatty acids from HFD generates oxygen-free radicals in the mitochondrial chain that act upon the fatty acids of the cell membrane, causing lipid preoxidation. The oxygen-free radicals induce pro-inflammatory cytokine synthesis due to Kupffer cells and hepatocytes, such as tumor necrosis factor alpha, which activates the caspase pathway and leads to hepatocyte apoptosis.
Mm-hmm. I think if we view all of this information, these inflammatory effects, and we want to tie this back to a quality diet, one, we know the high fat maybe should be avoided from our Western diet, but we've already reviewed micronutrients in this course. And one example of that is zinc. When zinc is consumed in appropriate amounts, which will vary from individual to individual, it's known that it can inhibit the middle of an inflammatory pathway that's cascading down from oxidized LDL. And that's done through an A20 gene.
I also did a pathway on zinc, which was directly on FKB downstream from oxidative LDL to prevent that same cascade of events. This is down through the gene PPAR alpha, which downregulates the activation of inflammatory cytokines.
Yeah, so just closing in on this, a poor Western diet, something that's high in fat and excess of the macronutrients, how that leads to inflammation in the hepatocytes and how that leads to cell death in the hepatocytes, and then again leading to the adipose storage and accumulation in the hepatocytes. So what to take away here is to consider micronutrients as well in a well-balanced diet, and in order to avoid these high fats and decrease inflammatory effects.
Mm-hmm. So here are some references. That was on time.
Okay.
Just
I thought we were